Okay. No, I've got it.
Okay,
Yeah.
you got it.
Okay. Good afternoon, Holliston, and thank you everyone for coming this afternoon. We have the school committee here, and we've got Ben Sparrow from the Select Board. Call the meeting to order. It's 5:04, and it's June 2nd, which is not our typical schedule, but here we are. So we're here to review and discuss the applicants for the appointment of the one-year school committee open seat. I thought I would start with just a review of the school committee policy regarding the member unexpired term fulfillment. So when a vacancy on school committee occurs for any reason, the the Select Board and the remaining members of the committee share the responsibility for filling it. As provided in the law, the school committee will notify the Select Board that a vacancy has been created within 30 days after it has occurred. After a written notice has been given by the committee to the Select Board, voters of the town may have the opportunity to state their candidacy. The two governing bodies will then meet to fill the vacancy by roll call vote. If no voters state their candidacy, notice will again be given to voters so they have another opportunity to state their candidacy. For election to fill a vacancy, a candidate must receive the majority of the votes of the officers entitled to vote. The person so elected will fill a seat on the committee until the next town election, at which time a member will be elected to serve the remainder of the term, if any. A decision not to fill a vacancy before the next town election must be made by roll call vote of the two governing bodies. This policy is established by law. So today we do have 6 applicants. All of these people, one person dropped out, so just in case anyone has been keeping track.
Are you allowed to say who dropped out?
I mean,
we can go through like who's here.
Yeah, I think we can go through who's here.
Thank you.
So all of the applicants submitted letters of interest last week. We've invited each of them here to present a public candidate statement. Recognizing that we had a tight turnaround between when the applications closed and this meeting, candidates were given multiple options to participate, so they could come in person or Zoom, or we can read a written request, a written submission for presenting their statement. So at this time, I think we'll get started with the applicants. I did have 2 people request to go early. We've got Robert Page. He's via Zoom, so I think if we can start with Robert, we'll just...
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So my name is Robert Page. I live at 617 Washington Street in Holliston. And I wanted to start by thanking the school committee for making the time and giving us the opportunity to speak. I apologize for not being there in person. I got a baseball game here at Flag Field in a couple of minutes. And so I want to thank you guys for letting me up here by Zoom. I thought I'd start by talking a little bit about why I wanted to apply for the position. As a child, I moved around a lot. I went to 3 different high schools, one in Alabama, one in Minnesota, one in Kentucky. And so I didn't really put down deep roots in any of those places, and I really wanted that for my children. And so that's why my wife and I moved to Holliston 10 years ago. We really wanted to be a part of the community, and so I've coached some of my kids' sports, coached some soccer and baseball now, and then I also want to help out the school system. I'm a big believer in public education. I'm a product of public education. I've never actually attended a private institution. I got my PhD in mathematics in 2005, but actually, before I got my degree, I actually taught high school for 3 years. I got a little burnt out when I was in grad school. And I taught high school mathematics for 3 years in Batesville, Mississippi. And that was just a hugely formative time for me in my mid-20s to sort of be in that role and play that role in the community of Batesville, Mississippi. I worked football games, I worked the prom, the project graduation on graduation night, and I really saw how important the school was to the community, and so that's part of my motivation there. The last 20 years, I've been a professor at Framingham State. One of the things that attracted me to that job is that it was the first public teacher college in the country. They called it a normal school back then. And so as part of that job, I get to supervise middle and high school student teachers and train those guys before they go out into the field. And so I visit high schools and middle schools, and actually I was thinking about it, I've been in some elementary schools as well, because the middle school license is from grades 5 through 8. So I've seen middle schools and high schools and some elementary schools all over eastern Massachusetts, and I always take the opportunity to pick the brains of the supervising practitioners when I'm out and kind of get a feel for how things are going in that school and that community. It's just something I've always been interested in. And then in the past few years, I've actually moved into supervising some middle school math and science teachers, so not just math, but actually some science teachers as well. And so I see a lot of different schools. I see a lot of different school schedules. I see a lot of different schools having different resources from other schools, have different policies, and really every school is pretty unique and has their own culture. And so that I've got a pretty broad exposure to Massachusetts schools there. I also served as a department chair for a term where I had to make all of the teaching schedules, I had to manage the budget, hire adjunct professors, meet with the administration and shepherd policy changes through government. And we also went through a renovation where we completely renovated the science building on campus. And so for half of the third floor of that building, I had to meet with the architects and the administration and the faculty and kind of be a go-between between all those guys and say, well, here's what we want. And then the architects would say, well, here's what we could do. And we had to meet in the middle there. So, that's sort of been my experience lately. And I feel very strongly about public education and want to give back to the community. And that's, between baseball and teaching math, that's kind of all I really do these days. And so I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right, sure thing.
Yeah, thank you. And have a good game.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
Yep, bye. Okay.
Sorry, just a quick question.
Sure.
They're just giving
We're just doing statements.
not interviewing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. So then I think we'll move on. We'll do David Keim also had we had an appointment as well, so we thought we'd put you up further on the schedule.
David Keim, 442 Fisk Street. Good evening, members of school committee, select board, and members of the Holliston community. My name is David Keim, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight regarding the open one-year school committee position. For those who may not know me, I have spent the last 27 years serving the students, families, and staff of Holliston Public Schools, including the last 23 as the principal at the Fred W. Miller Elementary School. Before coming to Holliston, I taught elementary and middle school students in Marlboro and overall have a 33-year record in education. Just as importantly, Holliston has also been my home since 2000. My wife and I raised our son here, and he grew up in the community, and many of the relationships we value most were built here. Holliston is not simply the place where I worked, it is the place that helped shape my family and my life. As I prepared to retire from my principal role at the end of the school year, I realized that I still want to serve this community and support our schools in a meaningful way. Public education is changing rapidly, and districts everywhere are facing important challenges involving budgets, staff and student mental health, staffing, curriculum, communication, and maintaining strong school cultures. I believe my years and experience inside the Holliston Public Schools would allow me to contribute positively to those conversations during this one-year appointment. Throughout my career, I have worked closely with teachers, support staff, families, district leadership, union leadership, multiple superintendents, and school committees. I understand both the day-to-day realities inside our classrooms and the larger district decisions that impact students and staff. I have spent years working on strategic planning, curriculum implementation, professional development, social-emotional learning, initiatives, school improvement planning, and the use of data to improve student learning and support all students. At Miller School, much of our current work has focused on strengthening communication with families, improving social-emotional supports for students, expanding student voice opportunities, supporting multilingual learners, improving curriculum alignment, and building strong professional learning communities among our staff. Those priorities connect directly to the district's strategic goals into what families want for their children, schools where students feel safe, supported, challenged, and connected. I also believe one of my strengths is collaboration. Over the years, I have learned that successful schools are built when people feel heard and respected, even when opinions differ. The best decisions happen when we keep students at the center of the conversation while balancing the perspectives of families, educators, administrators, and the community. Beyond the schools, I have tried to stay actively involved in Holliston through youth sports, church leadership, mentoring, and community service. Those experiences have reinforced for me how important strong community connections are to the success of our schools. I'm not seeking this opportunity for personal recognition or as a career next step. In many ways, this comes from gratitude. Holliston Public Schools has given me an incredibly meaningful career, lifelong friendships, and the privilege of working with thousands of students and families over 3 decades. Serving on the school committee for this one-year term would be another way for me to give back to a community that has given so much to me and my family. Thank you again for your time, your consideration, and for all that you do to support the students and families of Holliston. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Karen, would you like to go next?
Sure.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here. I appreciate it. And I speak to the school committee, select board, members of the community, and the other candidates. I think it's fantastic how many people have thrown their hat in the ring, which shows how many people really do appreciate our schools, our community, etc. My name is Karen Apuzzo Langton. I live at 100 Woodland Street. I moved in 2002. I've been here for 24 years. I love this community, and that is why I'm here this evening. And I would like to talk to you about a little bit about my background, why I'm here, and the passions that I have, having been an educator and been in the classroom since 1992. So I come from a family that believes in civic engagement and that it isn't optional. It's a calling. And they did it not just because they believed they had to, they did it because they believed that the benefit to the people around them was greater than just to themselves. I grew up around water in Rhode Island, and if anyone knows Rhode Island, you can't help but be around water. And my father believed deeply with his whole heart that the Narragansett Bay belonged to everyone. And at that time, everyone could not get to the bay. People who owned the property directly on the bay were the ones that had the access, but there is a rule that everyone's supposed to have access. So my dad worked with a coalition of ordinary citizens and spent time fighting to establish and protect public access to all points along the bay. It was a slow and unglamorous process, showing up at meetings, building coalitions, pushing back an entrenched interests, and those who preferred to keep the coastline private. But he did it with decency and persistence, never losing sight of the principle at stake that an entire community benefits from the resources, not just single people. And this was a very powerful statement to me, to really think about the fact that a community is built around its resources, and this is what people project themselves to be part of. Today I could take you on a tour and I could show you all those access points that still stand. My father, unfortunately, is no longer with us, but when I go on that tour, I think of him and his values deeply. My mother showed a different kind of civic engagement, and remember, now we're in the 70s. Women didn't have a lot of power, and my mother immediately took on roles of being a Cub Scout leader, a PTA president, and she firmly believed in giving back to her community as well. My family fell in very hard times. I am not from money. My parents worked very hard to get everything that they gave us. And my dad decided that he was going to try to open up his own business, and again, not a common thing to do in the 70s. And so my mother took a job working on the factory floor at Hasbro, putting together Mr. Potato Head. And she didn't do it initially by choice. She did it because we needed her to be there. And she ran on tough circumstances there. It was the first time she had really worked with multi-language learners. And my mother is of Portuguese descent, so she understood some of the Portuguese. And what happened was the factory was changing the quota system. As my mother figured out how to beat the quota system, they kept adding it and making it harder and changing the timelines. So the business was cutting corners, trying to save money, didn't want to pay them the bonuses, so to speak. So my mother didn't accept it quietly. She organized, she talked to her colleagues, she built consensus, and she mobilized what was then known as the mother's shift from 10 to 3, so you could be home for your children, to stop work and demand fair treatment. She didn't do it to grandstand. She did it because she communicated clearly, and she believed that everybody should be treated with respect. And within a few hours, they did reach agreement, right? Hasbro was just a Pawtucket company back then. It wasn't a multinational company. But she didn't do it for a title or for a platform. She did it because she has principles and she had people, and she always taught me that principles and people were enough. I watched both my parents my entire life showing up and doing the unglamorous work. I remember my dad pushing me and my brothers to try to play baseball when girls weren't allowed. And my dad telling me, you're going to have to show up and you're just going to have to be better because girls aren't allowed yet. And they did that work, and he did that work with me, and the bottom line is I did make the team. That didn't mean the coach had to play me. Holliston, my family, and how we put stakes down here. My husband and I chose Holliston 24 years ago because of the reputation of the schools. I was already a trained educator. I had spent time in New York City, and finding a district that had community, had a commitment to their schools, that meant a lot to me, and that is why we signed on the dotted line. The community welcomed us, educated our child, gave our family roots. This is not something that I take lightly when I talk about community. It's not, again, a campaign slogan. I use that because I am a trained marketing person. I mean that it's the actual people in the streets. It's my neighbors next door. It's the schools. It's the room parents that give their time. The neighbors that deserve a school community that is honest with them, accessible to them, and working visibly on their behalf. I do have one child. Their name is Declan. They went through the system pre-K through 12. They had Mr. Kime. They did elect the French immersion program because during pre-K, Declan came home and we were having dinner one night and said, "Mom, did you know there are people in this world that speak a different language?" And those people are French. And I want to do that. And I explained this was going to be a little bit harder, but they didn't care. They wanted that. They wanted to talk a different language on the playground. Today, Declan is at the University of Maryland on a full scholarship, working toward a PhD in American literature and teaching at the university level. And I will tell you, they were fortunate enough to have a Holliston High School student in a freshman English class that they were instructing, and they responded back to me that that student was the most prepared student in the room. So you should know that. What I love about Holliston is that, and Declan will tell you directly, that this education has been their foundation, but also this district is so important to all learners. that, the district is changing, and I teach in Westboro. I've been there for 20 years, and our district already has had that diversity shift, and it has been fabulous as a teacher to be part of that. Declan has launched. They are off on their own. I am so proud that they are tackling life. But now I have time, and I'm not doing this to check a box or to fill in a spot. I have time, and I've dedicated my entire life to public education. I, too, have been through all public schools. I went to Salem State for my teaching degree. I went to Rhode Island College for my undergrad. I went to the Fashion Institute of Technology for my degree in fashion design. I've been through all public schools. I've spent 20 years teaching high school business education across multiple communities in Massachusetts. I do not just teach, I write curriculum from the ground up. I build departments to reach every learner, for students most at risk and falling through the cracks to students who are ready to take on advanced placement learning. Most educators work on one end of the spectrum, but being an elective teacher, you work simultaneously at all levels. You scaffold when someone in front of you needs it. You work directly with some of the parents for students that are most at risk, that are having trouble even making it through the system. But every student deserves the same, and education is the great equalizer. I truly believe that, and that every child, regardless of background, deserves that. It is a moral conviction, and I live that every single day. On governance, school committee, you work to do your work transparently. The community clearly respects that, and openly families want to be able to see your reasoning and understand your policies. Working, and committed to open governance and bringing the community in, making sure that everyone knows that what they want to present, and even if you don't or aren't in the moment able to speak about it, but thanking people for coming and encouraging all of us to be part of this space that we all support and we all know is the center of our community. Being a high school teacher, you get to have that benefit of that it ends where you are, but it is a K through 12 experience, and every single teacher that's ever touched that student, every single principal, every single administrator, guidance counselor has got them where they are, not just one, but it's a collective. I've been asked a couple of times about evaluating superintendents, because that doesn't seem to be something that I would work with directly. But I would say to you that, the superintendent, they make decisions, and their vision reaches our classrooms, and it is our job to implement it and so that the students see it. And when policies are made that are open and easy to implement, it's so impactful to be able to have a superintendent who builds trust within the staff, and the staff knows that trust is just not a soft metric. It's such an important prediction of retention, morale, student outcomes, and I bring that perspective from being a teacher, and we do written feedback every single year, but I'm not actually sitting at the table doing the DESE part where you have your rubric and doing all that more detailed. However, we do know that it is a process and an honest one, and that every evaluation is an important part of the aspect of what you're doing. Budgeting, I would say that I look at it a little bit different than a lot of people. I think it's a statement of values. What is it that we, as a community, believe in? What are we funding? What are we unfunding? Are we doing it fairly with a sharpened scalpel that makes sure that no one specific learner or group of learners lose? Are we making sure that we do it across the board so it's even, so that it's careful? When certain things go unfunded, it seems to have an impact a lot of times on just like one group. I would also say that with my business education as a background and my degree in business, that I do understand financial analysis and economic reasoning, and I've worked in both nonprofits and for-profits. On the planning board, I did have to weigh competing community interests, and sometimes that wasn't easy. But if you focus on the discipline and you listen to and evaluate the costs and you understand what the community wants, then you can make an equitable decision. Good policy starts at the ground. It is carried out by people. It is lived through policies at schools, communities, and I've been writing and working in policy for 2 decades. I write the curriculum. Good policies support teachers. As a curriculum writer, it's important to pay attention to the goals and to the rubrics and to the expectations of the district and of the state. I've negotiated contracts as a union member, and last round I was on the negotiation team. And the big thing that I will say about that is that the language you agree upon is probably one of the biggest pieces of policy you write. It has to turn into how teachers respond, and it becomes the guiding principle. It's their working conditions, and when it's done with respect and it's done openly and decency, then it's a strategy, and agreements can be reached and mutual respect can be held. And last, I'll just close. I am ready to step in, listen, learn, and serve. I believe in open governance, in doing the public's work in public with honesty and transparency. I believe in teaching every learner, in building systems that reach the child who is struggling, and doing it with being deliberate so that child can thrive. We have a saying in teaching, right, that some kids will eat the curriculum out of your hand, but the ones that don't, that's who you're really there for, and that's who you're here for, right? Some kids are going to make it. All you have to do is get out of their way. Others really need you and need you to think about that thoughtful policy and that thoughtful connection that we can make in order to be able to get them to thrive. And so, again, I believe in this community. This community has given so much to my family. I believe in the capacity of what we have. I've watched this district for 24 years from the sidelines. My family has received extraordinary things, and I want just to close with, this is the community resource that my dad would tell me to get involved in. And you are the principal and the people that I'd want to work with and give back to. And I thank you so much for your time. I apologize for going over. It's an important position, and I hope that you will support the right candidate. Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll go to Ali Lima next.
Select Board and School Committee members. I'm Allison Lima, 59 Bogastow Brook Road. My eldest child walked into Placentino the fall of 2010 for kindergarten, and my youngest 2 graduate this Sunday. Woohoo! My 3 kids have vastly different interests: the theater program, music, arts, DECA, athletics, goes on and on. And to me, at this point in my life, the Holliston Public Schools seems almost like a time machine, where kids go in as kindergartners on one side, and they walk out, in my case, aspiring to become an actor, a nurse, and a real estate developer. So my interest in serving on the school committee comes with this perspective of someone who has experienced an awful lot of different things within Holliston Public Schools, as well as a person who has no personal stake in any particular school or policy. As noted in my letter of interest, I have experience with local, municipal, state, and federal government agencies, including serving on both boards and committees. I'm a licensed structural engineer by trade and a vice president in a global engineering firm. Therefore, I have a lot of experience in things like negotiating, budgeting, adhering to policies and procedures and regulations, public meetings, supervising and evaluating staff, and developing an annual operating plan. So do I have tons of transferable skills? 100% yes. Do I presently have intimate knowledge of all things school committee? No. But just like you, I can learn. Two additional items that make my perspective a bit unique is that though I am not in education, my husband Joe is. He's currently a high school teacher in a different district. Before that, he was a middle school teacher in a different district. And on his journey to becoming a teacher, he subbed at Placentino and Miller. So though I am not in education myself, I do have that lens of the teacher. Additionally, I have experience professionally managing the planning, programming, and design of all sorts of buildings, including schools, both brand new construction as well as renovations, additions, repurposing spaces, replacing HVAC systems, doors, windows, etc. This is relevant certainly for the future Holliston High School, but quite frankly for all of your buildings. So as to not reiterate my letter of interest, I think with my remaining time, I wanted to give you a sense of who I am as a leader, understanding that we all have our own superpowers, as well as areas we're all still working on. The key of the leader is really to harness each person's individual strengths. And so with that, knowing that you may be looking for a candidate who has previously expressed interest in joining the school committee, and knowing I am not that girl, I wanted to offer a shout out to Karen DeModica. Not only has Karen previously run for the school committee, she has children's in the schools and is a teacher. She would be a huge asset. Similarly, if you're looking for someone with demonstrated experience in committee leadership in the town, with a solid understanding of municipal finance, I want to give a shout out to Karen Apuzzo-Langton. Between her leadership experience on the planning board and as an educator, she would be fantastic. Perhaps you are looking for someone who is beloved in our community, someone who's calm and savvy, who would be a major asset in the teacher contract negotiation, and someone who knows more about our schools than likely everyone else in the room, Dave Keim. Though he's currently a district employee, waiting until July for him would be well worth the wait. Another facet of my leadership style is that I'm a highly ethical person and deeply committed to equality, fairness, and raising concern of bias. With this lens, I asked the school committee to consider developing a policy related to endorsements during elections. That Sarah and Dan effectively ran as a slate didn't sit well with me, nor did the fact that everyone else on the committee endorsed them. As I sit here today, I wonder about the elephant in the room, which is whether this is an equitable, fair, and unbiased process. Because based on the Facebook campaign, 5 school committee members have endorsed Dan, and that's not fair to the rest of us. Whether there is actual bias or perceived bias, it undermines the fidelity of the whole process. And I hope that during deliberations, there's discussion of recusals. So yes, I'm professional, and yes, I'm respectful, but I'm also a straight shooter. I appreciate all your service to the school committee. I thank you for the opportunity to speak and for your consideration of my letter. Thanks.
Okay, Dan, would you like to?
everyone doing? I'm Dan Alford, 315 High Street. Thank you for taking the time. I thought before getting into my qualifications for the role, I would talk a little bit about my background, because I haven't talked a lot about it in the past. I've started talking a little bit about it, but like another candidate, I was raised with the sort of philosophy that civic engagement was part of sort of what you did as a member of the community. Growing up, my father was a 6-year member of our local school committee, and my mother served for, God, I don't even know how many years, but probably over a decade on our Human Rights Commission in the town where I grew up. They gave back in countless other ways, coaching, being part of the PTO, different areas, and so that was sort of the environment in which I was raised, and sort of how I got involved and why I got involved in civic engagement as soon as I moved to Holliston, or a year later. So, until just recently, I've served for 14 consecutive years on elected boards, the finance committee, and the school committee. And I did that not for personal gain or any sort of personal interest, but because I wanted to give back, and I wanted to continue to give back. The Holliston Public Schools are in a very unique year coming up, a very exciting year, actually, but also a very challenging year in that we have our 4 sort of main administrators turning over, including our Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations, who sort of notified us that he was a finalist just before the election. And that really leads me to sort of why I think that, despite a very qualified group of other applicants, that I'm the best person to do this job. So I spent 11 years on the Finance Committee, deeply delving into all the town's budgets, including the schools. I was the liaison to the school committee from the Finance Committee for 3 or 4 years, including during COVID, where we were meeting weekly with the school committee via Zoom. And then I served for 3 years on the school committee, 2 as chair and 1 as chair of our budget. I worked very closely with our Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations, going line by line on our budget. In some cases, very, very detailed on all of the assumptions. And that is going to be something that would be critical in the next year as we bring someone new in to take on that role, while also supporting a new superintendent, bringing back our student services director, as well as a new curriculum person. One of the things that I think we've done very well over the last 3 years was the contract negotiations. So, in addition to being on budget, I was a member of 3 of us with Dawn and Amanda Bigelow on our contract negotiations. And we negotiated a contract and subsequent override that is truly setting this district up for the future. And as I sort of was doing research for this meeting and thinking about what I was going to say, I started going back through some of the posts and discussions that were had during the override about things that we were going to do. And one of the things that really hit me, and this is not something that I did alone, it was all of us, but we did every single thing that we talked about doing. Now, was the process, was everything perfect? No. Are there things that I would have done differently had we gone back to do it all over again? Absolutely. But we did everything we said we were going to do. We extended the time of each school by 15 minutes and put that time into the instructional day. We changed the start times to align Placentino and Miller, and to go from 3 bus routes to 2 bus routes, and that's working. We have an agreement with the teachers to change the high school schedule, something that hadn't been done in over 25 years and will be going into place next year. And I was in a sort of a parent chat with Mr. List a few weeks ago, and he said that normally when they run the schedule for the first time, they get about 1,000 errors, meaning kids who you can't fit the whole schedule together. When they ran this schedule through the system, they had 93 the first time. So we've got a schedule that's working. Is it the absolute best schedule I would personally come up with? No. Is it a huge jump from where we had before? Absolutely. And it is something that is going to benefit kids tremendously by taking everything out of DSB and allowing DSB to be what it really needs to be, which is a intervention type block for kids to go and get extra help that they need. So in the coming year, what I think the school committee needs is someone who fundamentally understands all the challenges and has the history and the knowledge to be able to participate and add value day one. And not just add value in the sense of being, a smart person in the room, being able to come up with ideas, but having the history, the knowledge of what was done before and how that applies to what happened in the future. How did certain issues interact with other issues? How much of the all the little things, the day-to-day things that people don't see that the school committee does, that takes up so much time, but is also critical to sort of the ongoing strong operations of the district. People, I think, know that there's a lot of work that goes into the school committee, but see the members meet every couple of weeks for 3 to 8 hours, and think that is the preponderance of the work. But it's the work on the subcommittees. It's the conference calls to discuss things that are coming up. It's the without a quorum, but with continued thought on what to prioritize, what to not prioritize. What have we done in the past? What do we need to do going forward? So anyway, you all know me pretty well, so I don't think I need to drown on about this. But we've got a challenging year coming up. We've got the school building really kicking off. We've got a lot of different things that my 14 years of experience working with the town, working with all the different players, and then working directly with our budget, knowing our budget as probably well as anybody in the district currently starting July 1st, is going to be absolutely critical. So with that, I think I will wrap up. I've made my main points, but so I appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you. And then I'm going to read a statement for Karen DeMonica. She is currently on a plane, so she was like, I can't Zoom, I can't be in there, and I said, that's fine, don't worry. So this is...
and this is in addition to what she had submitted, her letter.
Right, yes. She sent me a letter, an additional statement this morning. So she had submitted her application Friday, but this is in addition. So, dear members of the school committee, I apologize for being unable to attend today's meeting. I'm currently traveling with my son, Wesley, for an important opportunity that has arisen for him. I wanted to take a moment to share why I'm interested in serving on the school committee. Sometimes meaningful opportunities present themselves in unexpected ways. While pursuing this role was not something I had initially envisioned at this time, the opportunity arose and I recognized it as a meaningful way to give back to the community in an area where I believe I can make a valuable contribution. As an educator, like many individuals who have served on school committee before me, I can offer a perspective that may help inform thoughtful decision making. While our focus must always remain on what is best for students, achieving that goal requires us to consider the needs and perspectives of parents, teachers, and the broader community as well. Student-centered initiatives are ultimately carried out by educators, supported by families, and sustained by community engagement. When people feel heard, valued, and supported, they are better positioned to contribute to the successful implementation of those initiatives. In addition, I believe I bring valuable experience related to school facilities and long-term planning. I served on the new building committee for 2 years, 2 of the 5 years in Ashland, and have also experienced the process of transitioning into a newly constructed school in my current district. These experiences have provided me with insight into parts of the planning and decision-making phases of a building project, and then the practical realities that emerge once a building is occupied. I understand the importance of making decisions that not only meet immediate needs, but also support students, staff, and the community for years to come. I would be able to contribute informed feedback throughout the process and offer perspective on how design and operational decisions ultimately impact the daily experience of those who learn and work in the building. One of my strengths is my ability to understand and appreciate differing viewpoints, even when I may not personally agree with them. I believe in finding common ground and building consensus, and I would bring that collaborative approach to the work of the school committee. Sarah mentioned that there are currently few long-serving members on the committee. I view that not as a challenge, but as an opportunity. Rather than focusing on lack of experience, I see the potential for fresh perspectives, new ideas, and renewed energy to help move our schools forward in meaningful ways. I would be honored to serve if selected. At this point in my life, I have the capacity to dedicate the time, energy, and commitment that this role deserves. I would welcome the opportunity to contribute to the continued success of our schools and community. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Karen DeMonica. Yes, thank you, Karen. Okay. Let me just see. So at this time, I guess I would invite. We've heard the presentations. We've received the statements of interest through the application process, and I guess I would, if you're so willing, I'd like to invite comments like individually from each member. If we can just kind of get an idea of where, what your thoughts are based on what we've heard this evening.
I'd say one little thing.
Sure.
Before you maybe just,
Of course.
From people don't know, I'm Ben Sparrow, chair of the select board. Just to what I'm hoping and asking for is that we tonight can winnow this down to a couple candidates for consideration by everyone for an appointment next week, like next Monday. That's kind of what I was hoping for. As part of as an exercise and since my board isn't here, I was hoping to I want to make sure that they're represented and able to vote, participate in the process. And that's.
I agree with Sarah, and then I'd like to have a discussion about the candidates and
Sure.
straight off the candidate statements.
Sure.
I guess I'd like to hear each person's perspective on what they heard.
I guess to follow up on what Ben's saying, what is the goal tonight? Are we narrowing it down to 3 that will then come back next week and interview publicly, or like what was?
I guess it depends on what people are thinking.
Okay.
So to me, and again, this is my perspective, I think if we're talking about people and if there are candidates that seem to be rising to, amongst multiple people, I think it's fair to put that out there.
Sure.
And the process is on Monday at the select board, we would gather select board and school committee for a full vote. Is that
Right,
what
that's what
Right.
okay.
Because everyone who you'd have to attend to vote, but it would
Right.
basically the expectation would be the 9 of us would vote to make the appointment, and it's a majority vote.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess at this time, I was thinking we could kind of go one at a time, talk about what you've heard among these candidates based on the statements, based on any other conversations. We talked to a bunch of them. I talked to people over the weekend. And if, as part of your comments, if you can identify 1 or perhaps 2 candidates who you believe would be the strongest contenders to help meet the school committee's needs effectively over the next year, I guess I'd be interested to hear where people are landing.
Ask a question. So I know Ben's not officially on our board, but he's here as like a group member. This is are you looking to also contribute? Is he?
I would love to hear
Yes, okay.
Ben's
All right.
perspective as well.
Yeah, no, I would love to.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure.
If you want to go first, you're welcome to start.
Sure, whatever
Yes.
you think here. First, I did want to say thank you to the candidates and for everybody to make their statements and to put themselves out there for this position. I've gone through appointment processes where one person wants the position, so it's a testament to the importance and the value that the school committee provides. That we got 7 letters, certainly 1 dropped out, but I think it's very interesting hearing from each person, getting a little bit of perspective and understanding of variety of different things from each person. I think each candidate has a lot to contribute and a lot of experience to present to the schools and to the community. I think listening to this, I have a few that I sort of feel like I'd like to talk with further next week, in my opinion. I'll come out there and say, like, I think David Keim is definitely somebody that I would love to talk to a little bit more, and his incredible amount of experience within the district in understanding a variety of different issues and ideas, I think is valuable, and I think could be a wonderful contribution. I would also say Karen Langton, her extensive educational experience and a variety of different kinds of experiences within the community, I think offers something that I think would be very valuable as well. And I also would suggest also Ali Lima, with her experience in engineering, particularly as we explore things with the MSBA, having some kind of perspective on structure and things like that, I think could be very valuable and insightful as part of the conversation. So that's where I'm at this point in listening to people, and I think they're all incredibly valuable, thoughtful, and experienced individuals, and I think the choice is a difficult one for all of us. So that's all I have to say.
I echo everything Ben said. This is a really difficult decision. We have a lot of really strong candidates in front of us. I would also like to see Ali Lima come back for an interview. I really liked her building experience. Really, as we all know, I have my own thoughts on processes, and I really appreciated her perspective on the whole appointment process and maybe solidifying something around that. I think that shows a level of critical thinking that would be very valuable to the school committee. I also liked Karen Demotica for her MSBA experience. I think, the fact that we don't have anybody who has ever really directly worked with the MSBA, and we now have an opportunity to bring somebody in who has. I think that's incredibly valuable. Karen Langton is also a really strong candidate with her experience in education and also sitting on a municipal board. She knows the inner workings of government and also wears that education lens. So that would be my recommendation.
Firstly, I want to thank everyone who put in a letter of interest. I know it takes a lot, and then certainly coming off, an election, putting in one in, and then also coming after the fact, it's a lot. And it was really good submissions to make this a really tough decision. At this point, I struggle to name a single candidate, but there are a few things mentioned that I think are important to think about. MSBA is one of them. We will have a school building committee that manages that. So yes, having a school committee is important, but I look at what's important to me is where we are from a financial lens going into the next few years. Any year we can be in a really tough position. We have seen that time just yesterday, again, with districts that are mismanaging funds, not in a notorious way, but simply in you got to be on top of this on an everyday basis to ensure we're not in a budget shortfall. That is super important to me, and being on budget subcommittee, just seeing the inner workings of that is important. So whoever we go with, someone that can manage that. Same way, we are going to a negotiation year. Previous to 24, we didn't really have a contract for 2 years, and the damage it did between us and the teachers, having someone that can craftily work through that process. And point blank, we got a lot of emails, and I completely understand, and emails on all sides. The election did send a message. However, in the next year, we have a lot of things we need to navigate through to set us up for the future with an entire new, basically entirely new central office. that we'll need to partner with and work with. There's a lot of change. There is little to no stability. So the conversation around, listen, we need a different way of thinking, absolutely true, but literally when we're replacing everyone, that is hard to swallow. And it's going to be hard to navigate just with all the different opinions. So, you know, if you asked me to narrow it down, I do think Dan would be the most appropriate candidate, but I would like to see a further conversation with one other as a comparison. Like, this is not a vote. I'm not voting. I'm just putting out where I stand in terms of where my head's at in terms of the issues we face immediately, which then can change long term. But right now, that's where my head's at.
Again, I would like to reiterate the thank you for all the volunteers. Having 7 people step up was great. And regardless of what decisions are made over the next week, I look forward to that level of engagement moving forward for future elections and subcommittees and whatnot, because that is not always the level of turnout we have. I think one of our roles as a community member and committee member is to look sort of a little bit bigger picture than maybe sort of small, nuanced ideas. And as much as I would like to think that we have a good balance here, we do, but I think we also have some gaps as a committee at the moment that I would like to see sort of filled in. And I think the next person that fills this seat needs to make some of those gaps filled. I know personally I am not a numbers person. My brain just doesn't work in that. It just doesn't work like that. So looking at the candidates, hearing those that spoke about having a number sense, particularly around budget, negotiation, and the future with the MSBA, that's really where I think we need that experience. Not to say that we couldn't handle it and we wouldn't, regardless of who's here, but having that level of expertise is what I think we need. I think it's our job to be able to identify our strengths, but also our weaknesses, and for that I would like to see a little bit of continuity in those areas, particularly around the fact, as has been mentioned before, with our almost completely new central office. Having someone both in the superintendent role as well as the finance and operations, we need those connections among all of our committees. So with that, I would like to see Dan Alfred moved forward as a person for this role. I was also impressed with Mr. Page. I liked his connection to math, as well as his strong connection to a lot of our schools and our future educators.
So I also just want to thank those that volunteered for this one-year appointment. There were more than I expected, and I think that really speaks to our town's tradition of community and service. I also want to just kind of explain a little bit about how I was thinking about this as I reviewed kind of the candidate statements and listened as well and took some notes. We also received several emails over the past week from community members expressing support for one or more candidates, but also to kind of talk through how they were hoping the school committee would think through this. And there was a theme that really emerged for me in reading through all of those statements was the importance of selecting someone who can collaborate effectively with a variety of stakeholders, including the Holliston Federation of Teachers, which was named specifically, someone who has budget expertise as we enter into a period of leadership transition and state and federal financial uncertainty, and someone who will make the needs of students and educational programming at the center of decision making, and someone who is committed to serving all families in our district. So those are the themes that kind of really spoke out to me as I'm from all of those statements as I'm thinking about this. But I'm also thinking about what's happening for Holliston in the next few years, but the next year ahead, as we kind of what's going to be successful in this one-year role. I'm not thinking so much about the MSBA, even though that's really big for Holliston next year, but we're only going to have one person from the school committee represented on that. So I'm kind of thinking about this more holistically in terms of our work ahead, someone who's positioned to contribute immediately, either through experience in local governance, education, budgeting, negotiation, or some of the other areas that are aligned with our priorities next year. So in kind of thinking about that, I think that each of the candidates brought something, whether education experience, experience with governance or policies that But I think kind of the ones that really rose a little bit further for me with deeper experience, Karen Langston brings experience as an educator, service on the planning board, experience with collective bargaining as a union member, which I think would help her hit the ground running. And then, of course, Dan Alfred has a longstanding commitment to Holliston through both the finance and the school committees. Former chair of the budget committee, he really kind of walked us through, presented the budget to us in terms that made sense to me, and also worked collaboratively with the town to advocate for the school's needs, and was really instrumental in the collective bargaining a few years ago. So, in thinking about who I would recommend, that's what I'm thinking about in terms of the experience and the skills that we need.
Again, I want to reiterate, thank you for everyone that's applied. We really appreciate it. It makes our decision time consuming, putting a lot of thought into this. And I appreciate your willingness to come here tonight and provide a candidate statement, whether over Zoom or here in person, or having had it read. I took the opportunity when we received the applications and the contact numbers to reach out to each of the candidates, and I was lucky enough that they were each able to speak with me. And I think that that's important, because I think sometimes, we've been in the heat of the seat and being in front of the mic and providing your candidate statement. I'm thankful that the community had that opportunity, but I'm also glad that I could speak informally with you. I think there was a school committee member when I got on that said, I should have talked to you before you ran. If you had any idea how much work this was, you would never have done it. And I just wanted to make sure each of you knew sort of what we do. And I think you really all did. So it was good to know that we had so many community members that were connected to what the roles and responsibilities in this job are. But in having those discussions with each of the candidates, I think of the big four, right, in terms of what we do. The big four being, in my mind, negotiations, budget, policy, and superintendent evaluation. And I was able to speak with each candidate about their experience with that, right? And very much, I think Allie spoke very eloquently to, I can learn, and that I have transferable skills. So I'm not looking for somebody necessarily that's been on the committee, but that you've done this in your job. So it was a pleasure to speak with each of you, and I know Karen had served on the planning committee and understands all the roles and obligations of public office, having to make difficult decisions. And again, I'm really thankful that so many people have applied, and that we have this difficult decision to make. In considering that, I guess, we have had a number of emails. I thought, I am reading through them. I've thought about each and every one of them. One person had written to us and said, I'll close by saying this: we see at the federal level what happens when the wrong people are put in positions for the wrong reasons. The goal of the appointment is to choose someone who is best for the committee, and meaning the committee right here, right now. And in that email talked a lot about budget and finance and the needs of our school now. So when I talk about the big four and I talk about negotiations and budget and policy and superintendent eval, it's not an even four. For what this next year looks like, what weighs on me is that the areas that I feel like we need the greatest strengths in for this one-year appointment is budget and finance. And I guess I also wanted to speak to, because I heard again from others that wrote that Dan had lost, and I do just want to point out, we as a committee have been here before. I think it was about 11 years ago. There was an appointment, and that was following an election where the candidate that was appointed had lost. And when they lost with about 48.9% of the votes. Here, we've just had an election. Sarah and Jess both brought in about 61% of the votes, and Dan had just under 50% at 49.9%. So it is not lost on me that he did not win the election, but I think there is, when we look to what the voters said, we did have 520 voters of 1,042 voters that did want to see Mr. Alfred in this seat. And again, Jess, when we came and reached out to you about an appointment, it wasn't lost on me sort of the percentage by which, of voters that you had when you lost, but the tenacity, like the having brought the campaign and coming back again for this, that meant something to me, right? Because you understood the level of at that point, you had that year, you knew what this was all about, and you went back at it. So I had to really try and thoughtfully consider the individuals that wrote to us and said, regarding each candidate and the fact that he had lost. He also had just under 50% of the votes. And I think that does mean something, the 520 voters of Holliston. So in terms of talking about candidates, I have to say that in speaking, so Dan is one of the candidates that I strongly want to consider here. I also felt in my conversations with Karen D'Amatico, I did like what she told me in terms of budget and her work with the Ashland School District, her perspective on negotiations and work she's done there, and also having sat with the building committee for 3 years. But overall, in terms of what I see for the one-year appointment and our greatest needs on the committee, leading my 7th year here now, I do really worry about negotiations and budget in that area, and he has the demonstrated experience in that area.
Okay. So I will weigh in as well. Again, thank you. It is wonderful to have the interest here from so many. But just from where I sit, I guess I feel like the district has so much work to do just in this upcoming year. As has been mentioned many times before at this point, our central office admin team is going to be almost completely new. Teacher negotiations in the fall, the MSBA high school project, but most critically in my mind, we'll be facing ever-tightening budget issues. There was just a news article or little clip this morning that it was over 50 municipalities in Massachusetts had override ballot questions in 2026. It's not going to get any better. There's one district that's considering athletic fees up to $1,400 for hockey, and it's just crazy for one season for a public high school. And that's in addition to significant budget cuts. These are really hard times, and it's just we really need to understand where our numbers are, what the budget is, and how to put that together. And it's not lost on me that, in addition to these difficult budget times, we've also just lost our assistant superintendent of finance and operations. And while I know we'll do our best to come up with a solution to fill that position and ensure a successful transition, it's really clear to me that we need a school committee member that's well-versed in municipal finance and who has experience working on budget to help make this work. I truly thank all of the candidates for applying. I truly appreciate the support for our schools that you've demonstrated by your expression of interest. I really appreciate you've got a variety of backgrounds, education, experience in our school buildings, on other town boards, and yet I just really feel like my job right now is to advocate for our schools and to put forth the person who I really think is the best fit for what we need right now for this coming year. We are a young committee overall. I just entered my 2nd term. Dawn is the only one who's had more than one term. The rest of us are all in our first term. So there is a steep learning curve. And I don't feel like we have the time to waste at this juncture where all of these things are happening. So I guess for me, my support really is for Dan. So
So I know we did receive a lot of letters, and there were a lot of support, and there were almost as equal amount of emails we had were concerns, and some of those were very serious. I had 2 people reach out to me who said that they felt intimidated at office hours and felt threatened. And I think we need to take those very seriously. I understand the finance piece, and I wholeheartedly support that. But we need to think about the liabilities we're taking on, too. If we have somebody on our committee who people have already come up and said, I don't feel safe around this person, we really need to think critically about that, and we need to think critically about what it looks like to the community when, I mean, I hear what you're saying, that it wasn't as big of a margin as people perceive it to be with the election, but the fact is the community did choose this, and we need to just be very careful about how we navigate this if we're going to move forward with Dan, because the public perception is we're going to get backlash. I'm almost certain of it.
I know that we did receive 2 emails saying something to that effect and expressing some concerns. Now, that's 2 people's opinion. I wasn't there, so I can't, speak on that. But we also, on the other hand, also received 2 emails in support for his character and talking about what he has done for families in this town. So I think we need to take both of those together, especially if we weren't present for these, for this,
I got 14 emails about one candidate, some in support, some against. And some of those emails were not all sent to you folks. They were sent to the select board. I just got them today, so I certainly can forward things along. But I've got a considerable amount of conversation about one candidate and for and against, and not conversations about other candidates. And I have concerns about. I'd like to have more than one candidate on Monday coming forward. I'd like to have at least be able to have a choice to make on Monday, and we can have a deeper conversation and allow the community who now knows the names of the people that we're talking about can have an opportunity to weigh in on it. So I think that's something that needs to be public and allowed for that community engagement to hear more information from other people.
Just you referenced an email with an interaction, just so you know, those office hours, as we always typically have, are 2 or 3 school committee members. Sarah and I were there.
Yeah.
So feel free to ask any questions you'd like. So I did not agree with that email whatsoever. I was present for that.
Yeah, I'm the same.
There's a lot of dangerous language getting thrown around on both sides. And I think we need to be reflective of that and understand that there are, I think Ally said it perfectly, no one is perfect. I think certainly all of us need to look at each other in the mirror and say, look at ourselves in the mirror and say we have things we want to improve on. And I think everyone in the room that put an application in could say the same thing. Now, change is not easy. I think we all can agree with that as well. And when we want to bring change, you create a schism of cons and pros, and they're more loudly put out there. And it is, obviously we can quantify each piece of feedback, but clearly there's a divide. And I don't appreciate, it's not that I don't appreciate it, I am fearful of the rhetoric getting put around one individual that honestly is not who he is. There are a lot of things I have said on the record, and I will say off the record, I will say publicly. Like, there are things that, yes, make things challenging sometimes to work with. But if you do look at the progress that was made, and you have to look at process, and he called it out himself. And I think there's areas where we could have improved some process, but the progress made is transformational. Like, joining this committee, I was told multiple times, make sure you run multiple times because it takes multiple terms to get used to. And I feel like I've been in a whirlwind of the last 2 years, starting with the first day with the contract negotiation ending and then the override starting. That does not happen without courage. And I do think the community had courage in bringing these to the forefront, but there really was an individual to bring us there as well, and that was in Dan. And I do think we do not need to blow this up. It is a one-year appointment. It is a short-term appointment. This is not the future of the school committee. The future of the school committee gets decided every year at the ballot. So I guess my ask is we be careful about the rhetoric shared. We do not want to make this a character assassination. That is not our purpose here. And certainly let's speak facts versus emotion.
But how do you know that that's rhetoric? Like, that's your...
Let's bring the facts then, Jess. You said on your website that you'd like to see all three of you guys running on the committee.
Yes.
And now we're assassinating character of individuals.
I am not assassinating character.
Well, we're
Anybody.
introducing, bring the facts, then let's have the facts.
I am telling you that I got an email. I had several emails from
We all
people
did.
who
We had a lot
were
of emails.
concerned about their safety, okay? And I am bringing that to you. We are having a conversation. Let's do so respectfully,
I wanna
please.
stick to the question at hand is really just, we have a number of candidates. I guess in my mind, we've heard a lot.
I'm sorry.
I think we've all had.
I actually would like to make a motion at this point to put forth Dan Alford as the school committee recommendation to be considered on June 8th.
So you're making that motion?
I am
Asking
making
for- And then I'll second that.
Are you going to propose anyone else at that time?
I'm not going to propose anyone else
And we
at this
can't
time.
deliberate anymore. We're not going
We're not going to have any other consideration? If
Well, I
this-
think we'd have to vote on Sarah's motion.
I understand, but I'm asking you, are we going to make any other recommendation for anyone else to be brought forward on June 8th? Or are you saying that the school committee only wants to look at one candidate?
Well, we can vote on it. and find
You
out.
can vote on it, you absolutely can, but if you're only going to recommend one candidate, I'm going to bring all 6 candidates back next Monday to talk to all of them. Or you can propose a few candidates and narrow the pool, and we can just talk to those candidates. So I'm asking for more than one candidate for next week.
No, when you went through this process with the library last year,
And we didn't like that process. We didn't work with them as well as we should have, and we want to fix that process.
but
And that's part of the reason why we're here right now.
within what the bylaw, it is the same bylaw as last year, correct?
Absolutely.
So, and nothing was done in the last year to change that, correct? Okay. I also, I guess, thinking back to when the school committee and the select board collaborated on this back in 2015, they were invited to a joint meeting, they attended, and there were three candidates. It also, this is, in that situation, the candidate was appointed in a 5-4 vote. There was discussion. They were able to get this done in one meeting. I think that certainly everyone was invited to discussion. We've invited the candidates to provide their statements. We've all been provided with their letters of interest. We've all had opportunity over the last few days with contact information to reach out, do our due diligence. We saw the posting that appeared last week that said potential vote. I'm ready to move forward on Sarah's motion, and I would, it's been seconded, and I think we should vote.
I just want to be clear. I am not trying to be combative. As I hear all of Dan's strengths being discussed, I think it's also important to
Tina's
acknowledge.
on the line. She's got her hand raised.
I think it's also important to acknowledge the challenges that we've faced in the last 3 years. And I think there was a large oversight of that in our conversation just now. I don't think I was given a fair chance to speak about the emails in opposition, whereas you've all shared the emails in that show Dan's strengths, absolutely. But I didn't hear the other side of that come from any
I
of
don't think it's appropriate here to do that publicly,
I mean, what are the,
as I wouldn't on
Okay,
any other
well then,
candidate.
that's
I
fine. We
only
don't
wanted
have
to
to get
speak on
into
people's
details, but the sheer number and the fact that there's so much weight being given to the positives and not the negatives, like this is what we're,
So I will say, when we did the superintendent discussion and debate, it was challenging to sort of wrap my head around that we were only focusing on the positive, because I did have opinions in multiple directions that I wanted to share. And I think it was a conscious effort on everyone's part, and especially myself included, to make sure we were only focusing on the positive and that we were electing the best candidate because of their highlights and not because of anyone else's lowlights. And I think that's what we need to focus on.
okay.
I think it's just trying to respect the public space that this is, and that wanting to kind of bring forth people's positives and focus on that. Kind of understanding these are people, especially volunteering for a position, and so just wanting to make sure that's where our conversation stayed.
I also think, like, my reflection on this after 7 years, and Ben, you probably have this too. Sometimes it's the heat of the seat. You're going to be making decisions, and I know you're new to this, Jess, but you're going to make difficult decisions, and not everyone's going to agree with them, and they're going to be very passionate about it. It's not lost on me that some of the emails that were received were also from people who were fervently against the override. And so I look at it with, like, in the context of, you know, it's certainly not lost on them that you negotiated a contract along with myself and the rest of school committee that tied us to an override. So I think there is a lot of history behind all of that, but I do agree. I'd like to focus on the strengths, and I'd like to move forward today.
I think Tina, did you want to have a?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm sorry that I'm identified by my phone number, but this is Tina from the Select Board.
Hi, Tina.
And I apologize for joining late. I believe I've joined at a point where I hear the school committee alone looking to make a recommendation to the Select Board. You are not looking for a vote from, this is a jointly posted meeting. If I understand correctly, in this moment, you are not looking for any kind of input from the Select Board members prior to the vote, the motion that Sarah presented. Trying to understand process.
Yeah, the motion that is on the floor is that the school committee is going to recommend Dan Alfred to Monday night.
Okay, so I do apologize for joining late. I will watch the meeting later. I suppose I'm not surprised by the motion, given that the school committee supported Dan Alfred for his candidacy. And so what I perhaps have missed is the consideration of the other candidates and their strengths. So I'll have to watch the meeting to understand. Ben, I think I heard you say that you would look to bring other candidates forward for the select board meeting on the 8th.
Yes,
we can talk.
I think we should have multiple candidates to be able to hear from them on the 8th.
And I'm not opposed to bringing Dan forward on the 8th. I am opposed to presenting him as our only candidate. I feel very, very strongly that we should have at least one other person, preferably two, there on June 8th.
I mean, that was the communication that was given to the select board, is that there would be a screening of candidates and a slate would be presented.
That was my understanding,
not a
and that was the way I
candidate,
had
I'm here to listen.
talked about it. That was my request, and that was what I had put forward as a proposal for our participation this evening. If I'd known it was just going to be a school committee recommendation, I wouldn't have come.
I understand the request. I guess my thought is that I've heard Dan Alfred from
Sure. I'm asking.
the majority
what I'm
of
asking,
school
and that's
committee.
fine. But what I'm asking is, are there going to be other candidates that you're putting forward as possible consideration?
Other school committee members also mentioned candidates that had strengths and that they were interested in speaking more to. Are you now?
So, Ben, I've heard you say that a couple times. Are there going to be for it? And what I haven't heard is is a school committee member who's made a motion for that. So I guess in the absence of having made that motion, the answer might be no. But I do think the order of operations here is for us to vote on this motion.
Sure. I just wanted to make sure I understood, because the way the motion was phrased was that the school committee was going to recommendation that this was the candidate. That's the way I understood it. Maybe, perhaps I misunderstood. I thought it was, if it's a candidate to bring forward, that's a different, but the motion I heard was the candidate for the school committee.
And I also understood that was your request to Sarah, but in fairness, we have to meet as a committee, and Sarah can't speak solely on behalf, she's not speaking for all of us. And part of it is having that opportunity for us to have engaged with the candidates, to hear from the candidates, to discuss the candidates, and then decide what we're going to do. So I do think we have to take a vote on the motion.
I think if we look at, to Jess's point about the candidates, like what other candidate was mentioned, no one else had like a majority vote. So Dan, I don't want to waste anyone else's time also. Like I value the fact that they volunteered. If there is a majority already in place, and if I understand correctly, it's a majority vote at this point, even once we get to the select board meeting on Monday night. So I understand
We haven't really
that.
had a chance to interview anybody or ask. I have not had that chance.
You didn't call anyone over the phone?
I was not aware that that was part of the process.
So similar, again, when the school committee and the select board were involved in this process about 11 years ago, they did it that night. They had a joint meeting. The candidates presented, and they did a vote. I think they were able to cover 3 candidates within about an hour. So I think that I feel like I've done my due diligence and I'm ready to vote, which is again why I seconded the motion.
Jess, I didn't either. Just so
You haven't called anybody?
No, I was interested to hear the statements and the letters, and I heard a lot of the information I think that we needed.
I think it's clear the process around this is not entirely clear in our bylaws, and that's something that should be.
Another issue.
But yeah, exactly. It's a whole other issue, and we're not here to debate that. That's not on the agenda. But I think that is this whole process for all of us isn't comfortable because there's nothing that's truly. There's very few specifics, so there's a lot of room for interpretation, which I think we're debating here.
And I hear you, Ben, because I think what I heard when you discussed the candidates is this is not your pick, and I've been in your seat, but it might not, the vote might not go that way. But I will say the way. The way the current bylaws are set up, where there's 9 of us on this, I mean, we are the body that will be working with this 7th member.
Absolutely.
And I think, if I were to set this up, I would weight it in a way that we would almost have double votes, because we are the person doing the day-to-day, and when you put a person on the committee and they're not doing their share of the work, I mean, that can be a struggle for others too. So I think I made this decision from the perspective of having worked with him for 3 years, and even before that as a budget liaison. So I know he's a workhorse, and again, each of us that has brought forth an interest in moving him forward knows that they'll be working with him. And I think that's important.
And that's absolutely true. Look, I understand, and I'm not trying to overstate my role here. But what I am trying to say is that I think that there should be a little bit of a process, and to ensure that the community hasn't even been able to see all these candidates until tonight, to have an understanding and to be able to see which one is to their preference, and to be able to have an opportunity to weigh in on those things. And I think that's all I'm asking for. I'm asking for to have more than one candidate on Monday night, to be able to have a choice, to be able to have consideration, and to be able to have something that we can talk about. I mean,
Deeper conversation.
And I mean, look, there's a wealth of experience. Dan has an incredible amount of experience. He knows what he's doing. He knows a lot of things, and I don't debate that. I don't have an issue with that. There's some other questions that I have about some of the other candidates, certainly. I mean, one of the things I'd like to sort of understand here is that with David Jordan leaving, what's the plan for filling the role? The way it sounds to me as an outsider, it sounds like Dan's going to be David Jordan. Is he applying for the position? That's almost how it sounds at times.
And it just doesn't, I'm just trying to understand, kind of like, I want to make sure that you get what you need. I'm not trying to impede anything, but I am trying to make sure that the process is respected. And I feel like we need to have a little bit of time to be able to have that process. And that was the way I had put it forward and had wanted to be part of this. If I, my voice is my voice. I only have one voice. I only have one opinion. But I think it's important that the process is respected and we go through the whole process and have multiple candidates on Monday night. That's all I'm asking for.
And I hear you, and I
would like
also
to echo. I would like to echo Ben's comments. I heard reference to due diligence being done prior to the meeting tonight. I'm interested to hear the types of questions and due diligence work that was done and how it was applied to all 7 candidates. I'm not questioning it. However, to make a decision based on work that individuals did outside of a public meeting, I would like to know what that is. I would also like to know why there is no decision. I understand the motion and I understand the process here, which is to vote on that motion, and you're about to do that. But as the other members of the school committee consider that, I would ask that you also consider why you would not support first a motion to present more than one candidate. Why is the intent here to present only one candidate? Why not present 2 or 3? What about the other candidates do not raise them up to the level of being considered for a fully joint appointment between the select board and the school committee? Effectively, the select board is not an equal decision maker here in this process as you are defining it with this motion. And I think the optics of that are concerning. And so I would just encourage the other school committee members, as you're considering the motion on the floor that you're about to vote on, again, why not consider a motion that brings forward more than name?
I think Tracy spoke to that,
and having more thorough deliberation with the full select board, full school committee on Monday night.
And I think Tracy spoke to that in saying that in terms of after listening to the candidate statement, having the information available to us if we wanted to reach out to them and have more of a conversation. She spoke to the fact that we just walked through and asked for people to sort of outline the 2 or 3 candidates and some of the characteristics or experience that they might bring to this position. And what I think I heard was, I know I heard that there were at least 5 school committee members here that supported Dan. And so that, again, is I think why Sarah also pointed that out, that we may be in a place, or we are in a place, to move forward on that. And Ben, can you just remind me, before Tina spoke, you said something and I wanted to respond to it too. Can you just remind me about the very last thing? I apologize. Having a moment here.
Yeah, I probably had a moment too, so I don't remember exactly. If you think of it, just let me know.
I had a question actually about something Ben had, so maybe this is your question as well. But Ben, you mentioned an opportunity, you wanted an opportunity for the public to weigh in on the candidates put forward. So can you talk about what process you're seeing for that for Ginny?
For what process I'm seeing for?
For public to weigh in on candidates.
Well, I think, I received a number of notes about one candidate, and I think most people don't know who the candidates are. And I'd like to be able to hear from other people about who they support. And I think, some of the emails, like regardless, certainly some were in support, but some were just kind of, I want to have other candidates, in effect. And I'd like to hear from other people once they know who the other candidates are and to be able to weigh in on it.
So as a process for that, people could kind of follow up with their email or contact select board school committee.
Absolutely, absolutely. That would be the process that I would expect is to hear emails. I mean, one of the things that I think is very important to me is being able to hear from the public and being able to get that information. I think that's really critical, and being able to sort of understand a little bit more holistically about community support and input on topics.
Yeah, sorry. I did have somebody reach out and ask if they should be submitting letters of recommendation. It was actually, I'm not going to name names, but because they had heard that letters of recommendation were coming in for another candidate. I don't think other candidates were even aware that that was something that was being weighed or they had the opportunity to do. So I think if we narrow it down to 2 or 3, it gives them now a second chance to do that, put their best foot forward. We sit down, we interview them, there's a back and forth conversation, and it just feels like we're doing our due diligence, right? Like that's what the community has asked us to do, is do our due diligence. I think if we just move forward with one candidate, I'm not even specific to Dan, if this was anybody else, I'd be saying the same exact thing. I think moving forward with just one really, I don't know, I just feel like it sends the wrong message.
I guess that's a little different than what the school committee did 11 years ago, right? So if they've had the meeting and they made the decision that night, they didn't leave this open for a week's worth of emails or input. I don't think I need that. I think that I am in a place where the experience on those areas is really important to me. And so, again, this isn't like a second round at the election. You know, if we're weighing voters, I think we should consider that 520 voters just voted for him. So we might not get 520 emails, but that certainly means something, right? So, you know, I think I would like to see us move forward on this motion.
That's what I was going to sort of get into as well, that we're looking at a one-year appointment. It's not another election. We did that, and like you said, we had 49.9% people agree that Dan was a candidate that was worthy of sitting in this seat. And so if that changes and the voice of the rest of the town decides to vote, which I would love to see them do, then we can do that in a year from now. That's not what we're doing right now. This is an appointment. It's not a full election at this point. And we had, you know, I got 14 emails over the past 12 hours as well. And I think that's a small fraction compared to the 500 people that did stand out and vote.
Yeah, I agree. I do. Process is something I think we sometimes overlook. I'm not against, and I've said earlier, bringing forth another candidate to have a conversation. Where I'm struggling to think through is how we go through this process right now to bring that second or even third candidate, because we're so split. Like, how would we do that effectively? I think we each had someone that we supported. Some had 2, but at the end of the day, there was no like, okay, we are down to 2 or 3 that we're really talking about. It was a wide swath. So I'm struggling to figure out how we do it. I'm not philosophically against it. I also want to, you know, be mindful of people's times to extend it. So I guess the question, and Ben, I'd look, Tina, if you're still on. I agree with you. I think I've publicly said too, like, boards and committees have not worked together effectively. And there are reasons why things have happened and why not. I just am struggling to figure out, in this situation where we're at, take history out of it, how do we effectively move forward with a smaller swath of candidates for appointment with where we're at right now? And that's, any guidance there would be helpful.
I heard quite a few people mention Karen Langton and Allie.
I think we should probably, I mean, we've mentioned loosely, but
Almost as much as Dan.
I would say, again, I'm trying to struggle into, do we need a motion?
Do we just vote on the motion that's there and then deliberate and then see what happens next?
Excuse me, I'm here from the community. Can I just ask a question?
Let us.
Is there's no public
There's
comment?
no public comment. No, sorry. At this point, I'll just, let's just vote. Does it have to be a roll call? Or
Yes,
just,
sir.
okay, roll call vote, Jess.
And this is, can you repeat it?
The motion, probably not verbatim, was to put forth Dan Alford as the recommended candidate to be appointed at the June 8th.
The sole candidate.
The school committee's recommendation. Frank?
Yes.
Tracy?
Yes.
Hillary?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So that passes.
And then we will meet again on Monday.
Yeah, so then we'll be at the school committee, at the select board to take the formal appointment.
And I would make a motion to adjourn. Second.
Okay, roll call vote for that? Do we do? Yeah. Jess, motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Frank? Tracy? Phyllis?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Thank you.